I picked up some good ones here. I tell you, there's a lot of hockey talk here. And this is from Chris. He goes, the LA Kings are on fire and have the best home record in the NHL. You've been saying for months they have stud kids on the blue line and a bevy of snipers. I thought you were just blowing smoke. That's why you are bleeping brilliant. How far can Darcy Kemper carry this team?
He's hot in goal. He's played a lot better than expectations than I thought he would play. And think about this. The Kings have put together this phenomenal first half of the season without Drew Doughty. The big storyline with the Kings, it's just not Adrian Kempe and it's not the other veterans. It's the kids. Quentin Byfield has evolved as a dangerous big center ice goal scorer. Has done very, very well. And they've got young guys on defense led by Mikey Anderson. They're playing pretty well. It's a long season. Kemper has to continue to play this way if the Kings are going to go deep into the playoffs. But the Kings have already beaten the Edmonton Oilers during the course of the season. And, John, we know the roadblock in the playoffs for the Kings has been first-round eliminations 3 straight years by the Oil. So, I mean, the Kings have sent a message, and they're playing really well, stay free of injury. A lot of snipers, a lot of goaltenders, and Kemper is just having a really good season. And I did not think that was possible because when they got him in midsummer, I said, you're bringing him back? You got rid of him already once. Chris, good question.
Yeah, it is. And it's good to hear some news about the Kings and how they're doing because we tend to talk a little more about the Ducks than we do the Kings. So good on those guys. I hope they have a great run here.
So you won't be upset if I show up wearing Kings gear one of these days?
No, bring some of that old school like purple and gold that they wore, and that's going to look sweet.
The Kings ought to go back to the purple and gold crown on their jerseys, not this black, gray, and silver.
Yeah, and then plus you'd have the same color scheme as the Lakers, and that all works.
That's the way it used to be.
Well, that's how it is in Pittsburgh for all the teams.
All things. Hey, Chris, thanks for being with us. Happy New Year. Next one.
Okay, let's go here to Callan. He says, I know it's just the first year, but why do I feel like there will be some complaining from the top seeds about the college football playoff because of the layoff, much like the MLB postseason? It's only year one, but.
Well, 24 days off. And Oregon looked so flat at the start of their game, and they got flattened. I mean, I would have never, ever thought in the second quarter of that game it'd be 34-0. I mean, Ohio State just came out and torched them. And I really thought Oregon was going to come out and throw the hell out of the ball. I thought the phrase I used was these two coaches are going to fight fire with fire. They're just going to go after the guys. But they could not protect Dylan Gabriel. He got sacked 8 times. There was no rhythm, no flow till the third quarter of the game. And by then, that sucker was over. I give Dan Lanning a lot of credit. That's a really good season. That's a really good team he put together. He loves his kids. He had just at the postgame press conference, which I saw on the other channels, he just praised everything that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly had done with all their firepower. And there's no doubt Ohio State's got all these people. I'd say right now, as we sit here, despite the disgrace Ohio State's lost to Michigan at home, despite that, I think Ohio State's a team to beat now in the playoffs because, man, they're hitting on all cylinders.
Well, what's your take on Howard, the quarterback? Is he a game manager? Is he a guy that's just going to kind of get them through it, or is he going to make some big plays in these games?
I think they open up the playbook. I mean, what they did in the first round game when they destroyed Tennessee and what they did the second game when they took apart Oregon, they opened the playbook and they just let him throw the hell out of the ball. And there's Jeremiah Smith and Ibuku just running deep, and people can't stay with them. And the protection was great. And then later in the game, then they started to bust off runs. I mean, 500 yards offense against the Ducks. 500 yards in a bowl game. And that was supposed to be good team against good team.
Yeah, and it just seemed like Ohio State had a better scheme, strategy for that day because it was nothing like the game in the early part.
Do you think 24 days off hurts Oregon?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to buy off on that. I mean, you would think your guys would be rested, they'd be focused, but I don't know. I'm not going to blame it on that. I think the legitimate challenge here, to Callan's point, is that there is some reform that we need to see with these brackets.
Seeding
is a great one. I'd like to see it expanded to 16 so we don't have buys. That complicates things. And there's still a handful of good teams that aren't in the playoff that really could have performed well, like Miami and Alabama and what's the other one, South Carolina?
Oh, you're not going to drag that out. You mean the ones who lost their bowl games? They've got 3 losses now, but you want them in the postseason?
Yeah, because all their steam is taken out of their sail, so they're just like, whatever, But if those teams would be in if we had a 16, bracket. So they've got some tweaking to do, but I'm still loving this, that they've opened it up beyond 4, and now we're here at 12, well, now 8 teams.
And a side note, hey, Oregon, you're not playing at Autzen Stadium in Eugene. Why weren't you ready for this game at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, the granddaddy of them all? Callum, thanks for the comment. Always great to have you on board. Next one.
Okay, let's go to BDG. He says, Uncle Saw, when are the boys in blue going to lock in Tanner Scott and Kike Hernandez? Also, does San Diego stand a good chance to land Sasaki?
Everybody in baseball's of the opinion it will be either Dodgers or it will be the Padres. They both got really good track records. Both have got great pitching coaches along the way. Dodgers have had to overcome, obviously, the nightmare of all the injuries that they had and all the surgeries. But I don't think that's a negative. I just think the Dodgers are reevaluating what they let their pitchers do and how they handle them, et cetera, because the Dodgers did have 9 surgeries to pitchers at the major league level and the minor league level this past year. And the Padres have become a great franchise in a city that just loves them because it's the only thing left in this town. And they've wrapped around the quality of the product. That's everybody's of the opinion. But then when you read the blueprint that they sent out to all the teams to say, this is what we will allow you to make a presentation on, and we don't want to hear about your tradition, and we don't want to hear about any Japanese players who you might want to bring to the meeting. That's not going to happen. And we don't want to hear about the marketplace and the stadiums and the histories. Sasaki wanted definition of the structure of how you handle pitchers, how you develop pitchers, what's your medical treatment of pitchers. I mean, he was just really laser focused about becoming a great pitcher in that organization. What can you tell me about how you're going to help me get there? I was fascinated by the specifics of the blueprint.
Yeah, and that's the right way to go, because things like the tradition in the stadium, you can get that, just being a fan of the game. But this is like inside information. It's kind of their intelligence on how they design their franchise and their whole developmental program. So he's asking the right questions. But I mean, right here, BDG, just Dodger fans are so darn greedy. They think they're going to sign everybody, and they're going to sign Tanner Scott and they're going to re-sign Kike Hernandez. And, money is no object. I mean, when this whole thing is said and done, you said they had how many dollars?
They've spent $287 in guarantees in the month of December.
Oh, just in the month of December.
Yeah.
So what's their total payroll for the year going to be? Over 300, right?
Oh yeah. It's well over 300. I mean, the guarantees are one thing. The average salary then goes towards what your payroll is and how much tax they're going to be over the tax again.
Oh yeah.
But they seem to have no problem with that at all. I would think Tanner Scott's going to get a 3-year deal from somebody. And everybody that I've canvassed was of the opinion that somebody's going to be the Dodgers. And they've just been arguing back and forth. 3 years plus an option. How do you handle that? I would assume Kiki probably comes. The fact that they locked down Teoscar, that's huge. So they're not done yet. If they get Sasaki and Tanner Scott, pennant race over before it even starts.
Let's just call it. Yeah. But the Dodgers don't have like a legit closer, right? They don't have a Trevor Hoffman.
No, but they got closer by committee, which by the way,
right,
got them the World Series. Right?
Yeah, they have that. So that's why you think it's Scott may end up there. Kike Hernandez is just kind of a fun guy, and you follow him doesn't do a whole lot during the regular season, but boy, does he hit the hell out of the ball in the playoffs.
And he plays so many positions. He's kind of like Chris Taylor.
Oh yeah. He's like a clone of that guy.
Exactly. So we'll see where it goes. I think Scott's going to wind up in LA, and that'd be great for the Dodgers in terms of a left-handed insurance policy guy. And if they can settle on terms, which is 3 years or 3 years plus an option. But there are other people out there. Boston's out there. Yankees are still out there. And I think Tanner Scott right now is one of the marquee list of guys. What few marquee pitchers are left, Tanner Scott's right there.
There's a couple more comments here about Sasaki that are terrific. And this first one's from Hobby. And he goes, would Sasaki really want to go to a team that in a year is going to be a shell of itself? And then David said, Sasaki's not going to sign with the Padres. I don't know why the Padre fans keep thinking they're in the running.
Well, you got Darvish and you got the history of the Padres relationships with players in Japan. You got all things Preller and his relationship with Japanese agents. And you got Darvish. And then you got the front office executives, former Dodger pitchers who came from the Pacific Rim. I mean, if you connect the dots, why would you not? And it's a fixed price. It's not a bidding war. he can get anywhere from $5.1 million on a rookie contract, which is the amount the Padres can pay, to up to $7.1 million that Toronto and some of these other teams can pay. That's all he can get for the first group of years because he's an international amateur. So it's not a dollar deal. It's a structured deal. It's an organizational deal. He wants all this data of information. So I have no problem with Dodger fan piling on here and saying San Diego's not a player in this, but San Diego nearly beat your ass in the playoffs. And then granted they didn't, but they're right there and they still think they're going to be there. So even though you got Blake Snell and you re-signed Teoscar, so it's going to be fun.
You see, the Dodger fans are the real dancing peacocks here rather than Tatis. No, so this is what it all is these guys on one level, they're poking the Padre fan. There's no way you're going to get them. But on the other hand, they're so damn confident that they're going to get everybody they want.
Is that confident or arrogant?
All of it, all packaged into one. And you know what? They probably are going to get everybody they want.
Here's what I want everybody to do. I want all you Dodger fans who pile in here on Fans Forum. I want you to email and text and message all the people in your address book and tell them who we are and what we do Mondays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. and invite them to join. And hey, Padre fan, you are entitled to be on this podcast. We have no limitations. Hell, if we let Raider Nation out of jail on bail join us on the Fans Forum, Padre fans, do the same thing. Tell your people, because we do talk a lot of baseball. We get a lot of response on baseball. John, let's move on.
I love this. This is like 690 back in the day. Okay, Richard Flores, he says, Fans Forum, how long before you stop calling the Red Wings a rebuild and tag it as a waste of time? Thank you for NFL playoffs and spring training.
Well, Steve Yzerman just took some heat. He's the president and, in essence, the general manager of the Red Wings, and a lot was expected of Stevie Y when he came home. He was such a great player, and he'd been an executive in Tampa Bay. And it's been a real struggle, and they've gone through a lot of evolutions of rebuild with draft picks, rebuild with international players and Russians, etc. And they just fired their coach last week, and they went to the press conference. The Detroit media was really hostile. And Stevie Yzerman deserves a lot of respect because he's a Hall of Fame type guy and all the things he's done, but he struggled in Detroit going home, and I thought it was going to be a snap that he's going to bring the Wings back to its great legacy. But he took all this heat, and he looked at the media. He paused for about 8 seconds. I saw the press conference. He said, "This is a pretty good comeback." He said, I think it was to a guy it might have been the Detroit Free Press, the hockey writer. If you have a recommendation, just tell me what it is. In essence, don't tell me how to do my job. If you think you got an idea that's better that we haven't considered, tell me what it is. And end of press conference. But he's got a lot of work to do because they were great and they're not great right now. It's been a struggle.
So let's say you're a fan in Detroit. What is the dominant team in the media amongst the fans? Is it the Red Wings, the Lions, the Pistons, the Tigers, or is it Michigan Wolverine football?
What's the color of the day in Detroit right now, aside from snow on the ground?
Hawaiian blue
and silver.
Yeah.
You just answered your own question.
But overall, obviously right now, the Lions are the big story in Detroit, but overall, is that the number one sports t-shirt hat you're going to see in town?
It's all cyclical. Once upon a time, the Detroit Tigers, Sparky Anderson, that's pretty good baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time, the Bad Boys, Lambeer and those guys, Detroit Pistons, that was pretty good. Once upon a time, Red Wings, with all the Russians, they were the first ones that mined the European hockey market. They were damn good. Not anymore. It's all things Lions. But this whole thing is cyclical.
Well, in my brief visits to Detroit, it felt to me that, the Tigers are cool. The Lions, I was there about 10 years ago when they weren't very good. And they were like, all right with them. But it seemed like the Red Wings were some sort of mystical, team that we have reverence for.
Well, that was the Gordie Howe era.
Yeah.
That then became the Stevie Y era with all the imports from Russia. Like I say, Detroit was the first one from the NHL that went there and got these players to come here. And they got a lot of them. But right, this whole thing changes on an every third or fourth or fifth year basis. But right now, all things Hawaiian blue.
Hawaiian blue, man. Dan Campbell, man, what a guy.
Yep.
Okay, let's go here to Scott. And he says, the Bears should have given Belichick the keys to the team.
The only issue is what he left behind and the wreckage he left behind. And he wanted power. That's why he did not get the Atlanta Falcons job. And all you need to do is look at the track record. I'm sorry, the scoreboard does not lie. Post Brady, they are 31-53. And I dare you to go on the internet, open up their roster, just Google New England Patriots depth chart. And I dare you, outside of the kid quarterback Drake May, you find any other playmakers there? And to me, the answer is absolutely not. So, yeah, Belichick might have made sense, but not as the sole decision maker in the football operation, because his drafts were negligible. Granted, they found Brady. They developed Brady. Brady was a massive difference maker, but not since Brady left. That thing is a mess. So, Belichick's a victim of his own success, but a victim of his own football philosophy of how it should be done because it wasn't working anymore. As John said, Ben Johnson, coordinator, has done it. Maybe this is his turn because you got the quarterback to build on. But you got Pete Carroll's track record. Pete Carroll, unbelievable success at USC. Pete Carroll, tremendous success when the Seahawks were really down. So one of those two guys is wind up in Chicago. But they need to fix the offensive line. They got cap problems out the ears. They got to solve the defensive problem. So I don't know that Belichick coming on the front door, and I would never give Belichick player personnel authority anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if I were an owner, I would never do that. It just seems like he represents a previous era of the game, and we've advanced further. I mean, he'd be great, like you say, to have as a consultant. But the Bears deserve greatness. I mean, but when they were great in the 80s, it really made the NFL electric.
With Ditka.
Yeah, with Ditka and that whole crew, the fridge and sweetness and the whole thing. So hopefully they'll get a good coach here. But I just has a weird tangent. There's Scott here. You see how he spells Belichick? He spells it Belichick. Bill Belichick's last name is one of the weirdest names to spell, don't you think?
Yeah, Bella, Chick.
Yeah, it's like belly and then chick, like a chick. Yeah, it's just a funky name.
Quit going off tangent. Let's go to the next one. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Okay, let's go here to 4RXLA. Lee, as 2025 starts, what is your opinion on the LA Kings? And do they have enough to get past the Edmonton in the playoffs?
I think that the key thing is get in their head, beat them during the regular season, put second doubts in their mind. The Kings have got a cross-section of really great players, from Kopitar and Kempe to the role-playing veterans who can score goals, to the arrival of the Quentin Byfield, to the fact that that's a really young, new defense that does not have Drew Doughty back yet, to suddenly a pretty hot goaltender. What I'm impressed with is they got a lot of guys who can snipe goals for them. So I think the Kings are dangerous. But I think the Kings beating Edmonton in the regular season, that sends a message that there won't be a walk in the park when they get to play them in the playoffs again, and they'll probably face them in the playoffs again in the NHL Western Conference.
So the hockey talk's really ramping up right now, isn't it?
They got all the refugees from the old Canada network have crossed the border, and they're just jumping on board here, and that was just great.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, knocking off the Oilers is going to be a tough ask in the playoffs.
Exactly, but historically, Edmonton is not right now the same team they were before. That's a big issue. Yes, they got Draisaitl, and they got Connor McDavid, and it looks like the goaltender has grown into being trustworthy on a night-by-night basis. But I don't know if Edmonton's got enough defense right now. Something's not quite the same with the Edmonton Oilers, and maybe it's got to do with injuries, and maybe the roster has changed a little bit, but playoffs can be good.
What's the weather report in Edmonton right now?
Oh, I would assume it's probably sub-zero. I don't do calculations between centigrade and Fahrenheit very well, but yeah, I'd say anywhere north of the 48th parallel is damn cold and snowing.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been seeing these maps on the news, and it's all blue, and it's just coming down, so.
As John's favorite phrase is, I love to watch winter weather on my TV.
Exactly. Yeah, I live in San Diego for a reason.
Next one.
All right, let's go here to John. And he goes, I'm wondering what the heck is going on in St. Louis. The Redbirds used to be one of the most well-run organizations in Major League Baseball. They seem to have contracted Bidwell syndrome.
Well, they built through the farm system, the Redbirds way. John Mozeliak, the head of baseball operations, is stepping aside after this season. They've already got his replacement in place. They just need to get back into the farm system. But, if you go back and look, this is the first time forever They didn't draw 3 million. And it's first time forever, the farm system has kind of stopped producing players. So they're going to have to recycle how they do the business of baseball. And obviously getting out from under Goldschmidt's contract and trying to make the Arenado trade go through will give them breathing room financially. So either they go back into the international marketplace and get players, or they just pour more money in to get more in the draft. But St. Louis, last couple of seasons, has not been vintage St. Louis Cardinal baseball.
It's interesting because the Cardinals, they're never terrible, right?
Not for a long, long time.
Yeah, they'll go from being really good to being competitive, but they never really are it's rare for them to be in the bottom half of their division. It's a fantastic organization out there. But St. Louis is an interesting community. I was out there a year and a half ago for a game at the new Busch Stadium. It was terrific. The fans loved it, but it didn't have that same vibe that I was expecting. And it was a Cardinal Cub game too, but it still didn't feel like what I expected.
I just want you to know that this guy who created this podcast, sometimes he does some real dumbass things. He told me he's going to St. Louis, the arch and all. That's cool. I said, when you go there, right at the edge of Busch Stadium, there's a Hall of Fame. You got to go to the Hall of Fame. Cardinal St. Louis Browns joint Hall of Fame. Dumbass didn't go.
I know I did.
There's so much Cardinal memorabilia. And the one great year of the St. Louis Browns was in the midst of World War II, 1944. The St. Louis Browns won the American League pennant, went to the World Series, and played the Cardinals in the World Series in 1944. And they've got this whole room of Browns memorabilia, jerseys, photos, gloves, bats. And of course, the rest of the place is a shrine to all things Gas House Gang, St. Louis Cardinals baseball. But dummy didn't go.
I was only there for like 48 hours. And we went to Anheuser-Busch, to their headquarters. And then we were at the Arch, and that museum underneath the ground is unbelievable. It's all westward expansion, and which I love following. I mean, I need to book a vacation in St. Louis for a full week.
Go there for a whole weekend. I mean, the baseball, again, you're talking about somebody who grew up in the game. The greatest places in baseball history, you got to go to Cooperstown if you have never been to the Baseball Hall of Fame. But I recommend, this sounds stupid, and maybe I'm stupid, go in January when it's snowing like hell and there's nobody there. There's nobody in Cooperstown. You can go anywhere you want, all the shops, all the stores, all the restaurants, and you can go lose yourself in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown for 11 hours in one day in January. It's phenomenal. The second one, if you're ever going to Kansas City, go to the Negro League Museum. I call it the Negro League Hall of Fame. They've done such a phenomenal job over the last decade. Major League Baseball and corporate America has thrown a lot of money in there to help build the Negro League Museum. And the third one is go to St. Louis and go to the Cardinals and Browns Museum. I was in Cincinnati last year. The Reds have built a fabulous Hall of Fame right there at the Great American Ballpark. And Reds baseball, it goes way back. It's more than just the big red machine and Sparky and all that. Reds baseball goes back to the early 1900s, and they were, quote, the pioneer franchise of the old National League. And obviously center field, Yankee Stadium, the shrine that is now out there in center field. I mean, there's so many cool places. Padres Hall of Fame in Petco Park is kind of cool, but Padre baseball only goes back to 1969.
Right.
But we're talking about franchises who are doing historical things with their teams going back to the early 1900s. Like, that's the end of my speech about what you should do on your next vacation.
I mean, it's just, a lot of people make their vacations and they go to ballparks, right?
Sure.
That's a thing, Major League and even the minor leagues. But yeah, the museums are a big part of it as well. And, there's a lot of stuff in Middle America that's actually really cool to see. And so that's like, get an RV, man. You could be gone for 3 months.
Yeah. And, I went to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. I went to the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. Obviously, Cooperstown, Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Canton is must see. You have to spend a lot of time there. But, that goes back to the heritage of the National Football League going back to 1920 when they first held the first meeting in Canton, Ohio, at an auto dealership. So yeah, if I had my druthers, that's how I spend my vacations. But I have a vice president of programming that has influence in where we go on vacation, and she doesn't know and do that all the time. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, let's go here to Ramon. He goes, Diamond Sports Group has officially emerged from Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and will rebrand to Main Street Sports Group.
Diamond is trying to rally back Actually, Milwaukee, which they had dumped, has now just redone a deal to come back in to Diamond Sports Group. Does it work? Will it work? MLB does not have the opinion it will work. The problem is that I think there's 21 major league teams right now who were part of regional sports networks, part of it being Diamond and Bally Sports. 21 teams are not getting the TV revenues they used to get because of what happened with Diamond Sports. That's a big, big issue right now. Major League Baseball's of the opinion that in 2028, they're going to get the rights to virtually everybody in baseball, take it all in-house, create a unique streaming package, and the baseball franchises will be better off. I mean, the Padres were the first one that got hurt. Arizona was the second one that got dinged when Bally Sports, Diamond Sports went into bankruptcy. They're not getting the amount of money they were getting before, but they've kind of thrown their support behind Rob Manfred and the whole streaming package that he believes they're going to have full control of by 2028.
This is good news, I mean, that hopefully, because a lot of these markets, it's just weird how the TV is just so different market to market.
So fragmented.
It's fragmented, everything about it. So this is just all part of the evolution. But again, way back, the NFL has revenue sharing, but obviously at one point they probably didn't. And certain teams like the New York Giants were probably making a lot more money than the Green Bay Packers. So how did the NFL get the big owners to agree to share their revenue?
Art Modell, Cleveland Browns owner, came from an advertising background in New York City. Art Modell, Browns owner, went to league meetings back in the 1960s, I would say, and said, we need to have a different media sports package. And let's create this relationship with the networks. All the money gets pooled into one central system. It's distributed evenly. We'll grow this. And that's where the birthplace of NFL on TV was. It was on CBS and NBC. And then they came up with the idea in the 70s about Monday Night Football on ABC, and you saw how that grew.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously Fox came to them and said, we want to be part of this. We're going to form a network, Fox Network and Fox Sports. And people said, nah, I'm not going to take somebody who's never done this before. They took the Fox money, and then Fox became a power and a player. Then you got ESPN, and now you got the whole world is streaming. So, I mean, it's fascinating as it has evolved. But Art Modell, as angry as the world or the Cleveland world is angry at him for taking the Browns out and moving them to Baltimore, Art Modell is the genius behind all things with the TV networks and all things with Monday Night Football, because he's the one that created it. And he's the one that went to the commissioner at that point, Pete Rozelle, who was a marketing whiz unto his own, and said, this is what we should be doing. And look what it's evolved into. 30 million viewers per game, regardless of where the game is sent.
This is just such a fabulous topic because, first of all, that happened all back in the 60s and 70s. Those ideas came forth about the revenue sharing. But now the haves and have-nots in baseball are so extreme.
Yep.
And sure, you could maybe put a hard cap and a hard floor to ceiling, but there's still a lot of variation there. I mean, it would be hard pressed to see the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers willingly give up dollars. It's almost got to get to a point where there's a crisis, where some of the low end teams start going bankrupt and you start going from, what do we got now, 30 teams down to 29, 28 until they can realize that they've got a serious business problem.
But there's a way to do it. I mean, you and I have talked, and for the fans out there on our live stream, the Yankees and the Yes Network and the Mets with SNY and Boston's Red Sox with Nesson and Dodgers with sports, what it's called, there's whatever their sports network. They're not going to give up their regional networks because they are making such enormous profits because they're big regional franchises in major markets. But there's a way to negotiate. You pay us a certain amount of your money that goes into a central fund, and then we'll work with all these other markets to develop streaming, and we'll have our own pot, and then we'll distribute it. The Yankees would get a little bit. The Red Sox, the Mets, the Dodgers would get a little bit of this new pot of gold, but this money would then be distributed to all the other teams, which would mean a bigger TV spike in revenue. But as a byproduct of that, there either has to be a hard cap or a steep luxury tax, and there has to be the floor to spending. Because if you have the floor to spending, that means you're mandating Pittsburgh and Kansas City and all these other small markets must spend $120 million on payroll because they're getting this volume of money. So there's 120 million per team out there. That means the second tier star pitcher, he's going to look at pitching in Pittsburgh, a great baseball city, a great stadium, or Kansas City, or Detroit, or maybe Miami, maybe Tampa, because those teams are going to have to spend. The money's going to be there, so that makes the Rays and the Marlins and the Pirates a better team because they're getting the top of the second tier pitcher to join them. Does that make sense to anybody aside from me?
It makes a lot of sense if you were able to wave a magic wand. The union obviously would love to have a floor to ceiling, and all their guys that make more money, and there'd be stars in every major market in baseball.
But the union does not want a salary cap at the top.
Exactly.
And baseball says we're going to have one and we need the other.
Right. So if you push hard for one, then you're going to get negotiated, have to accept the other. And I think that's why they've backed off on this. The other part of this that's interesting is the NFL, you could say, is a national sport where baseball may be more of a regional sport. And then that kind of complicates things in terms of revenue and eyeballs and everything else.
Sure. But there's ways around it. And I mean, baseball's TV ratings have gone up. Baseball's attendance is at an all-time high. I think the baseball demographic is very different now in terms of younger person watching the game. So there are ways to change this, but you got to get everybody who's going to throw their lot into it. I'm sure the old New York Giants and the old Washington Redskins back in the day didn't like Modell's idea of all the TV money going into a pot and being distributed evenly. But then they saw it. They saw what the networks became, and then the networks evolved, and then Monday Night Football showed up, and now Fox came on board. So there's ways to get it done. You just got to have the big boys buy into what you're trying to do for everybody else for the good of the sport. And I think everybody would agree now the NFL is pretty damn popular and pretty good.
Yeah. They're squeezing the turnip.
Okay, a couple more here.
Couple more. XX Revolution said, "Hey, Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, the Dodgers is Sportsnet LA," and yeah, that's the one. Right. Okay, I want to go back up here to the Daily Bluntathon. Okay, and this says because this idea of labeling leagues and players as negative is a bad look. I read MLB articles back from the 90s attacking the character of players like Albert Bell, and it makes me nauseous. Stop.
Well, the question is, what is the responsibility of a professional athlete making phenomenal amounts of money? Just to be a great player between the lines? What about being a good citizen, bad citizen, acting like a human being? I mean, Albert Bell had some real emotional problems, and he had a lot of issues with his teams. He had a lot of issues in baseball. You have to report the story as it occurs. If the guy's going to throw tantrums in the clubhouse, you got to report that. If the guy's going to act like an ass towards umpires and get your team in trouble and get fined, you got to report that. So you may not like the negativity, but sadly, we do have to report that piece of the story in addition to the greatness of who LeBron James is or what guys are doing for charity and what coaches are doing, et cetera. So we just got to report the whole thing. I don't like the content of the NBA right now. I think it's despicable. I mean, the junk that Embiid has put himself in, I think there's a mental health issue with him. And there's some type of social problem, I think, with Anthony Edwards. And these are supposed to be your stars who are representing what? How they act? That's not good. So the Daily may not like what's going on in sports, but from a media perspective, we do have to cover it.
Yeah, you got to cover it all. I mean, that's what we talk about. But the Albert Bell, all I remember is he had that illegal bat. Didn't he like climb through the ventilation system to get in the dugout and try to steal the bat back from the umpires?
Yeah. It just
and he went by the name Joey Bell for a while.
Yeah. He was just.
But see, this is the deal is these are all young men like in their early to mid 20s that are not fully mature, and maybe they haven't had the best, role models in life. And so some of these guys, there are character flaws. It's just real. It's human.
Yeah. But we're dealing with, in some cases, I think there's a real mental health issue with Embiid and how he acts and responds to everybody.
Well, there's a real mental health issue in all of America right now.
I concur. Okay. A couple more here.
Okay. And then here, David corrected us here and he says, for Kevin De Bruyne, he says it's pronounced De Bruyne. So you got to get that right.
He's talking about the guy from Manchester. I'll be interested to see if he moves. I'll really be interested. He's a fine player. He's got a lot of miles on him. He's a fine soccer player.
But he's from the Netherlands, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a Dutch star. And hold our breath. And I'll be shocked if Mo Salah leaves Liverpool. Anything is possible there. Okay, we got social media here. Where do you want to go?
Okay, social media. Let's get everyone involved here. And Let's light it up here with the Vegas Golden Knights. And this is from Lenny. And he says, Hacksaw, can you talk about the Golden Knights? What do you think about their chances to win the Cup?
Really, really good hockey team, really deep hockey team, really good ownership with Bill Foley hockey team. Have had problems with injuries in goal. They're right there upper echelon in the West. But I guess until you take Edmonton out, Edmonton is still the team to beat. But man, there's some good hockey clubs out West. I mean, there's a storyline in Vancouver. That's a pretty good team. It's got a lot of inside problems right now. And there's rumors there might be a massive trade or two. They got to change the locker room chemistry with the Canucks. But there's some pretty good hockey teams out West. And here come the LA Kings who want to join that equation. Nobody's talking about Minnesota. Man, they got goal scorers. Now they got some injury problems right now. Winnipeg is the real deal. Man, they are big and they are deep, and they might have the best goaltender in all in Connor Hellebrooks. I think the NHL Western Conference playoffs, they're going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it sounds like the NBA where the West is usually more stacked. But in Vegas, are the Golden Knights drawing a lot? Because I know a lot of people have said that they're never going to support the A's, and their support for the Raiders have always been kind of lackluster.
Knights, a.k.a. sellout city.
Yeah.
And they've done such a great job. Now, they were the first ones in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they won almost immediately. So that carries a lot of clout in terms of the credibility and what Foley and that organization have done. So, yeah, Vegas could be playing in the Western Finals again, but there are some other good people that we're going to pay attention to.
Okay, let's keep moving here. Let's go talk a little Rams. We're here with Conrad. He goes, this is really a well-run franchise. Les Snead making the picks and Coach McVay getting potential out of these guys. We were 1-4 and about to win the division, which is unbelievable. Love my Rams. Go Rams.
I'm just curious, and I don't know how to gauge this. Have the Rams won the fight for LA against the Chargers? I don't know. It's interesting. And now they're both on a roll going to postseason play. The Rams beat Seattle. That's going to give them 11 wins. From 1-4 to 11 wins, that's pretty bloody impressive. And they get the postseason. Now, that's a young defense, but that is Matthew Stafford, and that's 2 deep at wide receiver, 3 deep at wide receiver, phenomenal running back, and just the gifts that quarterback is. So they're pretty good. I don't know how to gauge that. I don't know. Maybe we ought to throw this open to LA fans on our next podcast. Who owns LA now? Is it a Rams town, or are the Chargers made inroads because of Justin Herbert and the arrival of Jim Harbaugh? But boy, McVay's a hell of a coach.
God, he's unbelievable. I mean, the more I learned about this guy, it's amazing. But Les Snead doesn't seem to get the credit of a lot of the other big-time GMs in the NFL.
Look at that roster on the defense. Those are all draft picks. That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Well, they're starting out the season 1-4 and then getting to the playoffs. It reminds me of the Chargers. Was it in 1992 where they started off 0-4, then they traded for Stan Humphries? And you said they were going to run the table, and I think they almost did.
Almost did.
Yeah.
And they had a good run for a short period of time. Injuries changed the whole scope of your team. But it's a Rams team that was just gutted by injuries to start the season. At one point, they had 6 offensive linemen on injured reserve, and they had Puka and Cooper Kupp coming off knee issues, and they did not hit stride and actually get to be a contributor till midseason. And now look where they are. They're 9-2, and virtually everybody is now back totally healthy. So here come the playoffs, and these guys need to be reckoned with.
Playoffs. Okay, here we go. This is from Jarhead. What does it say? Jarhead Irony. Or Jarhead Iron. Yes. He says, Nick Saban said this long time ago about you're out of control with the NIL and the transfer portal. Nick Saban said this a long time ago. Coach warned of this nonsense. I agree. It's become unmanageable and ridiculous. Amateur athletes on full scholarship does not deserve to make lots of money off endorsements. That's what drives these young men, not the pride of playing football.
Well, but understand this, though. The NCAA making all that money for all those decades denied the players the chance. And it was only after they got dragged into court the first time by UCLA star Ed O'Bannon, and that became NIL, name, likeness, image. That became a lawsuit that they finally came to the table and started negotiating. Now it's totally out of control. The pendulum, which was over here with the NCAA, did nothing for the student athlete except put him on the field and make money off his name. Now the pendulum swung all the way over here, and it's totally out of control. And you can say, there's nothing wrong with college football. Look at the games we just had. Yes, that's isolated, though. That's Ohio State. That doesn't tell you about how bad it is at Kent State. That's the greatness of the Texas Longhorns. That doesn't tell you how they don't have the nickels and dimes to make it work at North Texas State. The death of the Pac-12 is still out there. That's all triggered by all this money grab. So there's got to be changes. There probably will be changes. I don't know if we can bring sanity back. This thing, that's why all these great veteran coaches have walked away from the sport, both in football and in basketball. So there has to be a changing of the leadership and the changing of how this thing is to work. But this has happened because the NCAA allowed it to happen by not taking care of the student athletes as they were raking in volumes and volumes of money for decades upon decades.
Do you see a scenario where the transfer portal could be so disruptive to the sport that we might see a team out of nowhere, become dominant in college football, and teams like Alabama or Ohio State might kind of fade away?
I don't think they fade away, but some of these schools have been very slow to adopt the world that we're living in right now. Clemson. Is Clemson a national power anymore? And that's because Dabo Swinney hates the transfer portal, doesn't want to get involved in it. He took 2 transfer players last year. We got schools. Yeah, we had schools taking 20. So it's an issue in which some of the veteran coaches are going to have to adjust themselves, and it's fundraising. SMU has bought their way into the ACC. They have so much money in Dallas-Fort Worth to support SMU football. It's come out of nowhere, and it's happening everywhere. Arizona State get up off the deck after 3 and 9 seasons and empty seats, and they've raised so much money through, it used to be called the Sun Angel Foundation, to support the Sun Devils. I mean, it's phenomenal what they're doing. That's not good for the entire picture of college football. It's good for Arizona State, might be good for the Big 12, but it's not good for everybody else in the conference if they can't keep up. And that's the thing, is now you got one program here with volumes of money that's been raised to use to go get players. And by the way, they're raising the scholarships. They're going from 85 grants to 105. Not everybody can pay 105 scholarships.
105, really?
Yeah, that's a new NCAA rules.
So they're going to have to add more women's scholarships as well.
Exactly.
So that not every university is going to be able to pull that off.
It's a hell of a lot can't pull that off.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. It's got to change. Hopefully it will change. Next one.
Okay, let's talk some NBA here with Lemonhead. He says, the fact that people still watch basketball, game is in a bad state. The load management, lack of parity, the physicality no longer exists. A league bought and paid for by China. Such a tragedy to what used to be a great league of competition and rivalry. Looks like an offshoot of the World Wrestling Entertainment. Like, seriously, an in-season tournament that players don't even seem excited about? I'm done.
Yeah, they got a lot of problems. And I don't know if it's just the new generation that doesn't respect an awful lot, or whether it's just the game has changed and maybe there's so many great athletes out there, but it's not the same NBA that it used to be. And now it's spun into 18% decline in TV ratings. And that's a big issue for Adam Silver. He's got to pay attention to. If the networks come back to me and say, we're not paying the same amount of money and losing 18 to 20% of our viewership every year, and you got the streaming problem, which has now become an issue. NBA's got a lot of stuff they got to work on. I think they've got to work on the relationship issue with the players and how they treat other players, how they treat the refs, etc. Some of the junk that I've seen happen in games this year, it's abysmal. It should not be allowed to go on. And the league is, like I say, since November 1st, I think the league has handed out $2.3 million in fines since November 1st. That's 2 months ago, because of all these confrontations with players, players to players, players to ref, players to the fans, players to the media. Bad.
Now think about that compared to the other leagues, because Major League Baseball is changing the game and the rules to make it more exciting, more fast-paced. The NFL is changing rules to protect the safety of the players.
That's very inconsistent, but yes.
But what has the NBA done? I mean, they had the 3-point shot, and that was 40 years ago.
And now they're talking about changing that.
Well, they probably should. I mean, I think that we're at a point now where the NBA kind of needs a little bit of a tune-up or an overhaul.
It's called hit the reset button.
Yeah.
But that's got to come from the players. That's got to come from the Players Association. I mean, I'll ask this question to you basketball fans. You can send us a note on social media if you wish, or join us next week on the podcast. What do you do with Joel Embiid and Anthony Edwards, who become the poster boys for really bad attitudes, bad relationships, bad actions on the court? What do you do with those guys? Because you need great players, and there's no doubt those are great players, but those are guys who are out of control. So I'll just pose this question. That's your homework assignment for those of you on live stream. What do you think the NBA needs to do with those guys like Embiid and Anthony Edwards? because this is well beyond the stuff that Draymond Green has done in the last 5 to 7 years. This is much deeper and much worse, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But you know, it's funny how it goes in cycles. Remember, like in the early '90s, the NBA was like a lot of tough guys and
The bad boys.
and the bad boys of the Pistons, and the Knicks would win games like in the '80s with a score of like 88 to 82. The game goes through cycles. We're going through a downturn right now, but it just seems like everything changes once you get to the playoffs, doesn't it?
It does. It's still a rugged game. But so that's a homework assignment for everybody with us on a live stream. How deep a problem do you think the NBA has on its hands now with the Embiids and the Anthony Edwards? Let's do just a couple more on social media.
Okay, let's go here. Talk a little baseball. And this is from Ron O'Reb. Because they need to make a certain percentage of the luxury tax go straight to in-division teams. Example, Dodger money goes to the Padres, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, and the Rockies.
It's not going to work. It's got to be a total revenue share. If we're going to have rules as it relates to a much stronger luxury tax or a hard cap, if we're going to have that and we're going to have a floor to spending, they have to adopt a structure much like the NFL has in terms of total revenue sharing. Everybody gets the same piece of the pie. It's up to you not to screw it and to spend your money correctly and, make the right player acquisitions. But to get the owners to all buy off on it, that's hard. Get the union to buy off on it, that's even harder. But the fact that these owners a week ago at the midwinter meetings actually sat behind closed doors and talked about how you invoke a salary cap, a hard cap, and how you create a floor to spending, and then how you fund the TV revenue because of the collapse of the regional sports networks and the fact that Manfred wants to start the whole streaming service. These are complex formulas, but they all have to work together. And by the way, you got to work with a guy in the other street corner of the Players Association and Tony Clark for the good of the game. Why is the NFL so successful? Everybody operates by the same set of rules.
Imagine if they did this, what Ron is recommending, because you would make the teams in the Western and the Eastern divisions would get stronger across the board, and the Central teams would probably suffer, and then you end up with just bi-coastal World Series every year.
And what makes the NFL so great? Everybody operates with the same revenue. Everybody has an equal chance. That's why these guys get to the playoffs, get to the Super Bowl, say, what? How'd that happen?
Well, it's funny, though, but in the NFL, despite the fact they have relatively equal money, certain teams are great and certain teams fail every year.
You should not talk about the Cleveland Browns that way.
Or the Raiders.
Exactly. Hey, listen, we hope you have